Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Thanks, sponsors, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Hugs and Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. Earlier this week, I had the pleasure of having Gary Vaynerchuk, GaryVee, on the show with me. We did dueling questions, had a good time. In fact, there'll be a second part on Monday. This is Friday. A lot of fun. A couple of guys geeking out over cards and the good old days. I will say this, he's perhaps busier than I used to be at my busiest times, but you can see that he loves the hobby and he shares some of that passion and draws some of that out of me. So a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Again, thanks, Gary, and thanks, listeners. This has been a great ride, having a podcast and putting things out there for people to enjoy and react to. So here it is. Gary, good to see you.
It's such an honor, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're going to do dueling questions.
I'm ready for it, sir. I'm ready for it.
Yeah. Should I feel daunted? I don't know. You should be ready.
No.
You should be ready
No,
for my questions too. I don't know that you need any introduction. I don't need any introduction to my audience, but I welcome you to the show. And
Thank you.
I'm ready for your first question. And then I'm loaded and ready to fire back at you. Again, friendly fire.
You got it.
So hit me.
Well,
and welcome.
you got it. Thank you for having me. So, Dr. Beckett, I think, especially because I'm going to share a lot of these clips, people have watched me for 20 years make content on the internet, and I often refer to my entrepreneurial journey starting with the Beckett Price guide, and then when I got into the wine business, segueing into the wine spectator. Back to the Beckett Price guide. For the people that don't know, obviously in your world they know, but either the core origin story to make it fun for your audience, nuance of the origin stories of that iconic magazine that maybe hasn't been told so often. How do we get to a pair? Every person in the hobby in the 90s waited by their mailbox for that issue, who was going to be on the cover and what arrows were going to be up and down. How do we get there?
Are you asking me the question? I was going to ask
asking you that
question. Is that what do you say? You say legacy is your currency. Early on, I wanted to create something that would be a platform, a format that would have a level playing field for kids and adults, for dealers and collectors, to be fair to all, and to be not transparent in how the sausage was made, but transparent in terms of releasing a magazine that everybody could know was coming out reliably and accurately at a certain time, and they could work off that. So budding entrepreneurs such as yourself, as well as the crusty older people, it was low tech in those days.
Yeah, of course.
And that allowed me to do some things that fit my skill set. I've seen your skill set, and you're 21st century. I'm more 20th century, but 20th century, that was the format, the print product, and having to show up either at your dealers on Tuesday morning or in your mailbox on Tuesday morning. We tried to make everything come out around the same time as much as possible, because again, it needed to be fair. It needed to be fair because kids and adults can see if a game is rigged.
Sure, of course. Your point, something that may be lost on some of the youngsters that are listening, you know, getting the magazine 2 or 3 days earlier than someone was, in theory, a competitive market advantage in some ways. And so trying to get everybody to get at the same time was definitely, I'm sure, a logistics thing that you thought about.
We thought about it a lot because every industry has people that try to shortcut or do workarounds or hacks. And there were all kinds of attempts that people made, including trying to go work at the printer.
That's right.
Typesetter, but we did our own typesetting. I had my own HTML language that I created. So at the very last minute, we could go straight to the presses.
Oh,
so
very
we did
cool.
everything we could to eliminate lag there. The other thing we did, and I know you know this, is that we had to hire right, because everybody
100%.
in our inner circle would have known. They wouldn't have memorized everything, and they wouldn't have smuggled out a copy or anything, but they would have some inside knowledge, and they would have to hold on to that. All of our guys were collectors. They had to set aside their dealing while they worked for us, but they could still be a collector. But they couldn't mysteriously in 1984 or 85 sneak around to buy up all the Don Mattingleys or
That's right.
Doc Goodens in that day. And we monitored it. But I think the main thing I'm proud of is we hired right. We
That
hired
makes
right.
sense.
We built an esprit de corps that was the health of the company is based on the integrity, and there is no accuracy without integrity. The accuracy would have been contravened by people sharpshooting or getting ahead of the curve. And so we
When
took great pains, Gary, to do that.
when the hobby got red hot in the late 80s, early 90s, when there was more volatility on new releases. I think about O-Pee-Chee baseball in 92. I remember that. Faster. Was that a challenge from a price guide standpoint, given that when you speak about the era you're talking about with Mattingly going into 86 and 87 tops, obviously baseball, 87 tops is an iconic set for a lot of reasons. It signals a turning point in a lot of ways in American culture around cards. But as we got into the early 90s with new sets and different things going on, there was a little more volatility than had been in the past sets. Gathering that information to understand, again, for my audience that's listening right now, because I know I'm going to share, this is pre-internet. So it's just that you can't underestimate the work that Dr. Beck and his team had to go into to really get to a place where the gold standard price guide, you'd have 2 months in a row. I'm going to use it. I'm going to use the O-Pee-Chee baseball. You have 2 months in a row, sky high, but the accuracy, I'd go to shows and you could feel it was slowing down. And the next month, the arrows are pointing down. That took a lot of manpower and a lot of skilled manpower and a lot of gathering of information. Must have been an operational challenge, no?
Nowadays, people would say having a monthly magazine put us at a disadvantage, but it was perfect for the times. It allowed for volatility, but allowed for much of it to play out. At that point, around then, we had about 18 full-time price analysts who now work for other jobs in the industry, most of them, but really solid, mostly guys who had worked in card shops, had been show dealers, so they really knew the industry. And so they were tracking and they were on our nickel. We had somebody on the West Coast, somebody in the Midwest, some on the East Coast. Every weekend, we had a phone bank of people talking to the LCSs, to the card shops. But the monthly thing allowed some of that noise to play out, to could report trends that were substantive. Now, obviously, if something goes from 25 cents to 50 cents, we don't think of that now as substantive. But in those
Back
days,
then, yeah.
it was a big deal. So we used the annual price guides and the monthly price guides to the advantage in the rhythm of the industry at that time. And I can assure you, it felt fast moving. Now it's a
Yes.
blur now. But to do what we did every day or every instant would be impossible because
100%.
we were as empirical as we could be, knowing that it's a huge, but it was more North America, more US based in that time,
Yes,
and a lot more of the activity. There weren't breakers.
that's
Uh,
right.
there were major shows, and we were at all the major shows. Every card shop we were on a first name basis with, on the phone with every week. At that point, we had weekly deadlines because we had 4 magazines coming out each of the 4 Mondays.
Oh, because of the sports, the
Once
different
we got to all
sports.
the
Yeah.
sports, it really
Yeah, that's
allowed
right.
us
I
to
forgot about
really
that.
get comprehensive coverage.
Who decided which card and athlete was on the cover?
Initially, it was me.
It
Initially,
makes sense. Yeah.
I'm the passionate founder.
Yeah.
However, Gary, I kept getting kicked upstairs
Makes
over
sense. Yeah.
over
As it
the
grew.
over the
Yeah,
years.
as it
So,
grew.
and I
Yeah.
had very talented people. I had design departments and art directors, and I had the editorial staff that were seasoned baseball, football, basketball, hockey writers, as well as the price guide team, and they all had opinions. I could make the final call. Gary, when you're a sports fan, it sometimes was pretty obvious who should be on the cover. We also printed our covers differently and printed our covers as late as possible in order to be timely.
I love it. I love it. What an incredible. I mean, that Bo Jackson cover is so iconic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think about that
That
all the
was not
time.
my idea. I was smart enough to approve it. But again, that was the rage at that time. You don't
Yeah.
have to be a genius. You just have to have some vision. The vision, people think about vision, vision has to be of things that are not seen yet. It's not vision but
If it's already
somebody had to
happened.
think, let's do
Yeah,
that. And we'd have meetings, and they were in-person meetings for the most part at that time. We had everybody
of course.
in our big building, and we had a great team spirit. Those were great days.
Indeed.
Okay, my question to you related to that is, I don't know if it's your first book, but you wrote Crush It.
Yes.
You crush it when you were 9 or 10 years old. Do you owe me any royalties for my part in your crushing it when you were a kid?
Actually, I wrote Crush It in 2009, actually, not 9
I'm
or 10
saying,
years old.
I know.
Yeah.
So no, but your crushing experience when you were 9 or
Oh, I'm sorry.
and
Yes,
then
I do believe, sir, that I owe you a royalty check. We're gonna have to negotiate after the podcast. You can't comprehend lemonade. Believe it or not, lemonade stands really taught me a whole lot. The reason I think I did well at baseball card shows in 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93 was I learned a lot about merchandising and human behavior, even at Lemonade. Even at Lemonade, I would spend a lot of the time thinking about how to make a sign and where would I put the sign. And I remember I did a card show when I was in seventh grade, and the show opened at 9 a.m. and I didn't set up my table until 9:30. And there was two older grown-up gentlemen. There were very few kids that were doing shows back then. And as you know, the hobby, to your point, the economics are so different. Things are so fundamentally different. $2, $3 cards were really valuable and very sought after and serious in this era. But there wasn't a lot of kids doing shows. And I spent the first half an hour walking the entire show and listening and watching what people were reacting to. And then I came back and set up my table accordingly. And the two gentlemen to the left and right of me were being very kind, actually. They were trying to be gracious. Hey, kid, the show's starting. Like, people are walking by. What are you doing? I stayed in my lane, did my thing. And this was Friday. This was Saturday. And then Sunday, late afternoon, when my mom came to pick me up and the show was over, both those guys grabbed my mom and said, your kid's going to be all right. And I remember it very vividly because it was very flattering and it meant a lot to me.